everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalia Leigh. I'm an indie author and freelance editor, and today I'm giving you my top 7 tips for how to write strong, memorable, and complex characters. So if you want to learn a little bit more about character development and characterization, then stay tuned. Let's get started. Alright, so in my opinion, characterization can make or break a novel. I have the tendency to pick up books because I want to root for the main character, I want to see the journey that they go on, and I want to see their growth and development over the course of the story. Now, I know that there are kind of 2 different types of storytelling methods. You can have like the character-driven story or the plot-driven story. But for me and for my reading and writing tastes, I am always leaning toward the character-driven stories. But in order to have a character-driven story, you have to have a strong character. This character has to be convincing, they have to be compelling, they have to be complex, and they have to be able to relate to the reader and really make that connection with the reader. So my tips today will hopefully help you write stronger characters that your readers can really connect with. All of these tips can definitely be applied to your side characters, and I know that side characters don't need quite as much development as your main character and the star of your show, but I always love giving my side characters a bit of development, not only for them, but also for the story and for bringing the main character to life. So please keep all these tips in mind for your side characters because they need some love too. All right, my first tip is going to sound like a simple one, but this is something that I think many authors kind of struggle with, and that is that your main character has to want something. They need to really want something and have a goal that they're going after over the course of the novel. And not only do we need to know what this thing is that they want, but we need to know why they want it as well. So I will just use Pistol Daisy, for example, my book that's coming out on June 9th. In Pistol Daisy, our main character, Daisy Allen, really wants to get revenge and kill the man who murdered her entire family. So we know what she wants, and the reason she wants it is clear. Her family is destroyed, she's left broken, and she thinks that the only thing that will solve her problems and make her feel better is getting revenge. So we know what she wants and why. But I'll tell you one thing, it definitely surprises me how many books I have read and edited in which the main character doesn't have a very specific goal. So we might be following this character all throughout the action and all throughout the story and get to the end and realize, I have no idea what that character wanted this whole time. And that really leads to some disconnect between reader and character. So make sure your character has a strong want/goal, especially in like early planning stages, because if your character doesn't want anything, I really do wonder how they can go on an entire journey to get something that they don't even know they want. All right, my second tip is to make your character flawed. I absolutely love flawed characters, and this often plays into what your character needs. Now, needs and wants, oh my goodness, Tifa. That's his meow that says I just ate lunch. I can tell the difference between his meows. Okay, buddy. Wants and needs. So we already discussed wants, but what a character needs is slightly different. A character usually doesn't know what they need, and that's kind of the purpose of the journey of the story that they're going to go on. The character wants something that they think will fix their problem or fix their flaw, but they don't know what they need. And over the course of the novel, they're going to find out what they need in order to help them fix that flaw or that problem that they have been struggling with. Now, that's not to say that characters can't have multiple flaws, because they absolutely should. And having flaws in your character makes them more relatable, because none of us are perfect. We all have our own flaws, and by seeing flaws in a main character, it helps us relate to them and connect to them on a much deeper level. And I'm sure you've heard this said in many other places. You don't want to make, what are they called? A Gary Stew or a Mary Sue? Mary Stew or a Gary Sue? I can't remember what they're called. Essentially, don't make your character perfect, because nobody wants to read about an absolutely perfect character. We want to read about characters who have problems and are flawed and are just as messed up as the rest of us. So make sure that you are giving your character some strong and relatable flaws relating to what they need to learn over the course of the novel. My third tip is to make sure readers know what's at stake if your character is to fail at getting what they want. So you'll kind of notice that these first three tips are building off of each other, and this has to do not only with character development, but also with plot development and story structure. So once we know what your character wants, we need to know what's at stake if they are to fail, right? So let's just use Harry Potter for an example. It's an easy one because most all of us know the story. Harry Potter wants to kill Voldemort, right? And if he fails at doing that, if he cannot vanquish the evil Lord Voldemort, then the world will cease to exist the way we know it, because Lord Voldemort wants to take over the world. So that's a big one. That's a huge stake. Harry Potter has some huge stakes that he's going up against, and your characters don't need to have that high of stakes. They don't have to save the world. They don't have to throw the ring into Mount Doom. Like, there can be smaller stakes, but we still need to know what is at stake so that we can cheer for that character, we can support them along the way, we can feel some tension and some worry when we think they might not succeed at that thing. But again, the foundation kind of has to be placed because we have to know what they want in order to know what is at stake if they are to fail at getting that thing. All right, going along with tip number 3, tip number 4 is to give your character a worthy adversary. And I want to do an entire video on villains and kind of developing your villain and giving your book a strong villain, because I am obsessed with villains, but I do not like villains who are villainous just because they want to be or just because they need to be. I really love books that have a strong antagonist, somebody who is worthy of the story and worthy of the character. And there aren't going to be antagonists, I don't think, in every single story, because it depends on the type of conflict that your story is based around. There could be person versus person, person versus self, or person versus environment. So we're mostly talking about person versus person here if you have an actual adversary, an actual antagonist that your character is coming up against. But again, we're going to build off of what your character wants, because the antagonist is going to be standing in the way of that. Either they want the same thing, maybe they're a rival and they're trying to get to this thing before your main character can. Maybe they want the opposite thing. So your character's wants and your antagonist's wants are coming into direct conflict with one another, which is always a lot of fun. But what you don't want is a villain who says, I'm a bad guy just because I like being a bad guy. I can't stand those villains because you lose out on such wonderful opportunity of developing this person who is, in many cases, almost like a direct opposite to your main character. Or maybe they do have many things in common. But I think that when you're able to really develop your antagonist, develop the person who is standing in the way of your main character, your story has so much depth then at that point. And your main character also has more depth too, because they're going up against somebody who is not just a cardboard cutout. They're not just going up against somebody who's a bad guy. Suddenly they're going up against somebody who has their own wants and needs and goals. They have their own history and their past, and the world made them this way for a reason. And it just makes for much more compelling storytelling and more compelling action and tension and conflict when the antagonist is like a truly and fully developed person. So again, I want to make an entire video or like series of videos on villains because I love villains. I really enjoy writing them and developing them and thinking about them. So let me know in the comments down below if that's something you would be interested in. Okay, so my 5th tip might be my favorite of this whole video, but I would also argue that it's probably one of the most difficult to learn. If you can hear things in the background, Greg's in the kitchen making us lunch, so that's going on. Anyway, so my 5th tip is to give your character a strong voice. And I struggled with this for years, and I would say, like looking back on my writing journey, that it took me 6 books to figure out what voice meant. And for many years, I thought it was like this very specific thing, like, oh, voice is the way your character talks, or voice is like the slogan or like the catchphrase that your character always says. And while that might be a small part of it, that is not all that voice is. The way I see it, at least, is the way your character sees the world, the the way they interact with the world, and the way they kind of speak about their world and speak that truth. And I didn't learn this, and I didn't really learn how to do this until writing Pistol Daisy. So while I was working on writing Pistol Daisy, do keep in mind that I had just kind of recently finished working on Song of the Dryad, and the main character in Song of the Dryad, if you haven't already read it, is Charlotte, and Charlotte is a very calm, level-headed, and kind of quiet person. Like, that's just her personality. Now, Daisy from Pistol Daisy is very, very different from Charlotte. She's very different from who I am. Daisy is hot-headed, she's impulsive, she has a tendency to be selfish, so she is completely opposite from any character I've ever written before. And I will say that in the first draft of Pistol Daisy, I found that Daisy was slipping more and more into a Charlotte type narrative or a Charlotte type voice. And what I discovered through writing Pistol Daisy is that that voice I was writing with was my own. Like, if you read Song of the Dryad, you will hear me and you will see kind of my world and my experiences. And while I didn't mean to do that, it's certainly not something I set out to do, that's what happened. And for Pistol Daisy, I really pushed myself and had to learn how to step outside of my voice and find her voice. And when I was able to do that, the world, Daisy's world, really opened up for me. And something that I would encourage you to do when you're trying to kind of discover and unearth your character's voice is to ask them the hard questions. Ask them the controversial questions. You know, what do they think about controversial topics? What are their beliefs? Where are their morals? What scares them? What excites them? Like, learning these things and learning how they view the world will help you when it comes to developing their voice. But again, voice is not just what a character says. It's not a cheesy catchphrase that they say every time they get startled or anything like that. Voice is more than that. Voice is the way your character interacts with the world, and it's the way that they share that world with the readers. So again, with Daisy's story, I had to take her out of my voice. I had to kind of like put my voice on pause or like mute it so that I could turn hers up. And when I did that, I felt that the story came alive because I was finally allowing Daisy to be her selfish, arrogant, hot-headed, authentic self. And I was no longer trying to like, you know, put a lid on that or trying to turn that down. So once you discover who your character is, you'll know. Once you find that voice, you'll know. And for me, it took 6 books to get there. So don't expect this to happen overnight. I do really think that it's something that you have to kind of discover and develop over time during your writing journey. But I would definitely say that voice is one of the best ways to help readers connect with your character and experience their story from the most genuine and authentic place possible. All right, tip number 6 is going to be a simpler one than tip number 5. And tip number 6 is to give your character many different types of relationships. You can give them romantic relationships, friendships, give them siblings, parents, co-workers, bosses, pets. Like, explore as many relationships as possible because, as I'm sure you've experienced in your life, we all act, or my experience has been at least, that I act differently around different people. I'm not going to act the same way around my friends as I act around my family, as I act around Greg, or even by myself. By giving your character many different relationships and exploring those relationships through the course of the novel, through the action, you know, using side characters effectively, you will be bringing your character to life. And I almost picture side characters as kind of holding up a mirror to your main character. And main characters don't always see themselves very clearly. They might not know what their flaws are. They might not know that they have selfish tendencies or immature tendencies. But by bringing these other relationships into the story, you can really reflect who your main character is. So without necessarily needing to tell, and of course I need to do a whole video on show versus tell, without having to tell your readers, oh, this is what this character is like, this is who my main character is, by bringing in all these different relationships, you are able to show in a subtle, organic, and natural way who your main character really is, depending on the different people that they're interacting with. All right, and now my 7th tip, my final tip of the day, is to not expect all of this character development and characterization to happen in the first draft, or even just in your first book. I feel like I spent so many years thinking that if I could not sit down and write like The Daughter of Smoke and Bone, if I couldn't sit down and just write like Laini Taylor, or just write like J.K. Rowling, or, you know, whoever you admire, if I couldn't sit down and just do that, then I was a terrible writer and I had no future and yada yada yada. But I now look at writing as a constant process of learning. Of course, some people are going to sit down and just have a different skill set. Some people will be better at, you know, plotting things out, while other people maybe can't plot very well, but they can really weave words together in like a magical way. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, but I don't want anybody to come into writing books or working on character development or whatever it is you're working on. I don't want you to come into it and think, if I can't do this, then I suck, because it's something that you have to learn. And it took me 6 books to learn how to find a character's voice. It took me 6 books to feel like I was finally starting to grasp what character development is and what characterization is and how to bring a character to life on the page. So don't think it has to happen overnight or all at once. And while you're working on the book that you're working on, what I would recommend is to write the first draft and don't think too much about character development or characterization. I know that a lot of people like to print out, you know, entire packets of like character questions and develop their characters before they start writing them, but that has never worked for me, because I can plan out who a character is on paper, but then as soon as I start telling their story, or as soon as they start telling their story to me, which is often what it feels like, I will usually discover that that character is very different than the way I made them out to be on paper when I was filling in the character questionnaire. So my first draft, now at this point, my first draft is learning who the characters are and allowing them to tell me their story, allowing them to show me who they are. And then in multiple rounds of revisions, I'm able to kind of unearth that, and I'm able to polish their personality and really bring them to life in an authentic way. And that just takes time, and it takes multiple rounds of revision. And I also think it kind of takes just being brave enough to let your character tell their story and letting your character be authentic. Many people would probably think I'm crazy to hear me talk like this, but I'm sure you writers out there understand how it feels when a character really is telling their own story. Like, I don't believe that I created Daisy so much as she came to life and told me her story on her own. So when I became brave enough to let her be her authentic self, then I feel her character just jumped off the page and her story became much more truthful from that point forward. So take your time. Don't be in a rush, you know, don't feel like you have to fill out a questionnaire that's 500 questions long to figure out who your character is. Let them develop over the course of multiple drafts, because what I often discover, and what I think you'll discover as well, is that the character, you know, who we think our characters should be is not always who those characters actually are. And by letting them be themselves, I think you'll be allowing your readers to better connect with your characters and better connect with your story and really get pulled in and feel like the storytelling experience has been an immersive experience for them, which is what we're all kind of aiming for when we're telling stories. So thank you guys so much for being here today and for listening to my 7 tips for writing strong and complex characters. If you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments down below. I'm always open to suggestions for video topics. And if you didn't already know, I am a freelance editor. I offer content editing, copy editing, and proofreading. And my business, Enchanted Ink Publishing, also offers full formatting of both ebook, paperback, and hardcover. So if you are interested in editing services or book design services, check out enchantedinkpublishing.com, or wait until after the video and click the link that pops up right here, right, where Daisy's pretty little face is. All right, that is all I have for you today. I hope you are all doing well. I hope you are all working hard on your novels and bringing your characters to life, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!